People assume a marriage ends with noise. A slammed door, a voice cracking across a kitchen. They pictured the dramatic moment, the confrontation, the tears, the things thrown across the room that can never be taken back. But when my marriage ended, there was no scene. There was only a dinner table, a half-eaten plate of pasta, and my husband scrolling through his phone like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away from him. My name is Mara Calloway. I am 32 years old, and I spent 6 years slowly becoming invisible inside my own life. The last dinner happened on a Wednesday. We were at the Italian place downtown, the same restaurant where my husband Derek had proposed to me 6 years earlier. He had picked that table on purpose back then, the one by the window with the little candle in the middle. He had gotten down on one knee and said I was the most important thing he had ever chosen. I believed him. For a long time, I believed him completely. That Wednesday, the candle was still there. Derek was not. Not really. He was physically present. His jacket hung on the back of his chair. His fork moved between his plate and his mouth, but his eyes never left his phone. He smiled twice at something on the screen. Neither smile was for me. He didn't tell me it was over that night. He didn't have to. I already knew. I had known for months. I just hadn't let myself say it out loud yet. But before I tell you how everything unraveled and what happened after, hit like and subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Mara Calloway. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone and ambition is something you whisper about. I was always drawing, sketching outfits on the backs of notebook paper, redesigning my bedroom furniture in my head, reading fashion magazines the way other kids read comic books. By the time I graduated college, I had one clear direction. I wanted to work in fashion, not on the runway, behind it. Styling, art direction, building the visual world that made a collection come alive. I moved to Chicago at 23 with a used sewing machine, a portfolio I had been building since high school, and enough savings to cover 3 months of rent. I got a job as a junior assistant at a mid-sized fashion agency called Laurent Collective. The pay was terrible. The hours were worse. I loved every single minute of it. That's where I met Derek. He wasn't in fashion. He was a financial consultant who had come in to advise on a company restructuring. He wore a navy suit and carried himself like someone who had already figured everything out. He was charming in a quiet, confident way. He asked me questions and actually listened to the answers. He remembered details. That I took my coffee black. That I was from Ohio. That my favorite color was a very specific shade of dusty sage green. At 26, that felt like love. We dated for a year and then we moved in together. By year 2, we were engaged. By year 3, we were married in a garden ceremony in Michigan, with string lights and wildflowers and all of my grandmother's friends crying in the front row. I thought I had gotten everything right. The erosion started quietly. Derek got promoted. Then promoted again. He moved to a senior position at a larger firm, and suddenly our life had a different shape. We moved from our apartment in Wicker Park into a high-rise condo in the Gold Coast neighborhood. The furniture changed. The social calendar changed. Everything upgraded, except how Derek treated me. It started with small dismissals. The first one I remember clearly was about 8 months into living in the new condo. I had just been offered the lead stylist position on a campaign for an emerging designer I had been following for years. It was a real step forward for me, the kind of work that gets you noticed. I came home with takeout sushi and a bottle of champagne, ready to celebrate. Derek was on a call in the study. I waited on the couch for 45 minutes. When he finally came out, he was already tired. He looked at the champagne. "What's the occasion?" he asked, sitting down and reaching for a piece of sushi without waiting. "I got the Vela campaign," I said. "Lead stylist. It's a big deal for me. They're showing in New York in the spring." He nodded slowly. "That's good." He reached for his phone on the coffee table and glanced at the screen. "Hey, did you call the building manager about the hot water? It was slow again this morning." I stared at him. "Did you hear me? The Vela campaign. They're a rising name, Derek. This could change things for my career." He looked up, and there was a flatness behind his eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Mara, I had a 16-hour day. Can we not make this into a whole thing? It's a styling job. You'll do it. It'll be fine. Can you just call about the hot water? A styling job. That was the first crack. Over the following years, those cracks multiplied until the whole structure was compromised and I was just living in the wreckage, pretending the walls were still standing. I became a supporting character in the story of his life. I attended his firm's dinners, smiled at the right moments, remembered the names of his colleagues' wives. I hosted his holiday parties and kept the condo spotless, and made sure the guest towels were always folded. My own career had started to grow despite him. I was building a reputation as a stylist, good enough that I had been approached about launching a small creative consultancy on the side. I brought it up over dinner one night, a real dinner I had cooked. The table actually set. Derek listened with the particular kind of patience that is really just waiting for you to stop talking. "You want to start a business," he said, like he was repeating something back to a child. "A consultancy. Just freelance at first, then build it. I've already had 2 brands reach out." He leaned back in his chair. "Mara, we have a mortgage. We have a lifestyle to maintain. Your income from the agency is fine, but it's not something we're depending on, right? It's nice that you love what you do, but a whole business is a lot of risk for something that's essentially a hobby." Hobby. The word landed like a flat hand. "It's not a hobby," I said quietly. "It's my career. I just think your energy is better spent supporting what we're already building together," he said. "Can you pass the salt?" I passed the salt. I didn't launch the consultancy. Not then. My 31st birthday was the moment I stopped being able to pretend. I had asked for one simple thing, a weekend trip, just the 2 of us, Door County, Wisconsin. A cabin by the water, a few days offline, no work phones. I had suggested it 3 months in advance. He said yes. The Friday we were supposed to leave, he came home at 8 in the evening and told me he had a client emergency. He couldn't go. He had already called the rental and pushed it back a week, he said, as if the rescheduling was the thoughtful part. "It's my birthday," I said. "I know. I'll make it up to you. Derek, I planned this for 3 months. Mara." His voice dropped to the particular register he used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "This is a major client. You know how this works. Stop acting like I'm doing this to you on purpose." I stood in the kitchen in the jeans I had packed for the trip, looking at the overnight bag I had already zipped up by the door. He walked past it to pour himself a drink. That night, I went to bed at 9 o'clock. He stayed up watching television. He didn't come to check on me. He didn't even knock. I lay in the dark and counted how many times in the past year Derek had asked me how I was doing, genuinely asked, not as a passing greeting. I got to 0 before I fell asleep. I found out about Cassandra on a Tuesday morning in November. She was his colleague. Sharp, ambitious, 28 years old. I had met her at 2 firm events. She had a firm handshake and the kind of direct eye contact that I had always admired in other women. I had told Derek once that I thought she seemed impressive. He had said, "Yeah, she's good at her job." That Tuesday, I was home with a migraine, which was happening more and more often in those last months. His laptop was open on the kitchen counter. He had forgotten to close a tab. Not the whole browser, just one tab. A messaging app I didn't recognize. A notification blinked. I should have closed the laptop. I should have made my tea and gone back to the couch. I didn't. The message at the top was from Cassandra. It said, "Last night was the best night I've had in years. You see me, Derek. Actually see me." My migraine went quiet. Everything went quiet. I scrolled up with the kind of slow, deliberate calm that only comes when your body is in shock, but your brain hasn't caught up yet. The conversation went back 4 months. They talked every day. Not just the intimate messages, though those were there too, but long conversations about work, about life, about the future. Derek complained to her about stress. He talked about wanting more. He said things to her that he used to say to me in the early years. Then I found my name. "She means well, but I feel like I'm living with a roommate. She has no real drive. I've been carrying this whole life for years." And her response, "You deserve someone who matches where you're going, not someone who's just along for the ride." And then Derek, "I know. I've been thinking about it. I just need to make sure the finances are handled before anything changes. I don't want to lose the condo." The condo. Not me. The condo. Not me. The condo. I put the laptop exactly as I had found it. I walked to the bathroom, ran cold water over my wrists, and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. The migraine was still there. My reflection looked tired, but something behind my eyes had sharpened. I made the tea. I went back to the couch, and I started thinking. Not about screaming, not about confronting him in the middle of his office. I thought about what I actually wanted, which turned out to be a simple thing. I wanted out. Clean. Fast. Before he could reframe the story and make me the difficult one. I called a lawyer the next morning while Derek was at work. Her name was Patricia Howell. She was methodical and calm, and she had the kind of office that felt like it had absorbed 1,000 difficult conversations and come out steady on the other side. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. "We can go after everything," she said when I finished. "Given the documentation you already have, you have leverage." "I don't want a war," I told her. "I want a fair split, and I want it done before he realizes I'm moving. If I let this turn into a battle, he'll turn it into a performance. He needs an audience for everything. I'm going to take away his audience." We filed the paperwork within the week. I packed while he was traveling for a conference in Boston. I didn't take things that were his. I didn't take things we had chosen together. I took what had been mine before him. My equipment, my portfolio books, the chunky knit blanket my mother made me when I was in college, the small ceramic lamp I had bought at a street market in Nashville on a solo trip I had taken back when I still did things alone. I did take my jewelry. Not the pieces he had given me as apologies for canceled plans and forgotten conversations, but the pieces that were mine. My grandmother's ring, the gold earrings I had bought myself after my first real campaign. Those I took, because they were mine to begin with, and I had earned them without him. When Derek came back from Boston, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coat on. My suitcase was at the door. He stopped in the hallway. He looked at the suitcase. He looked at me. "What's happening?" he said. "I'm leaving," I said. "The divorce papers will be served to you here on Thursday." The color shifted in his face. "Mara." "I know about Cassandra," I said. "I know about the messages. I know you've been planning this for months and that your main concern was the condo." He opened his mouth, closed it. Then, almost reflexively, the anger came. "You went through my laptop. You left it open. That is a violation of my privacy, Derek." My voice was very steady. I surprised myself with how steady it was. "I'm not here to fight with you. I'm not going to scream, and I'm not going to cry. I just want you to know that I know, and I'm done." He stared at me. I could see him recalibrating, looking for the lever that would make me react, looking for the version of this conversation where he was still in control. "You have nothing outside of this life," he said. It came out almost gentle, which was somehow worse. "Your freelance work is inconsistent. You don't have savings. You'll be back." I stood up and picked up my bag. "You told Cassandra I had no drive," I said. "I just want you to remember that you said that." I walked to the door. He called my name once. I didn't turn around. The elevator doors closed. I breathed. I had a plan. That was the part he didn't know. I'd been quietly building one for the entire 2 weeks since I found those messages. I had reached out to an old college friend, Jenna, who lived in Asheville, North Carolina. She had a spare room and a standing invitation that she had extended so many times over the years that it had become a kind of gentle, ongoing joke between us. I finally called in the favor. Jenna picked up on the first ring. I drove to Asheville in a rented SUV with everything I owned loaded into the back. The drive from Chicago was long. I stopped once in Indiana for gas and a terrible cup of coffee, and sat in the parking lot watching other people pump gas in the cold. Nobody looked particularly happy. Nobody looked like they had just dismantled their entire life. I felt strangely okay. Asheville was different. The city sat at the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and even in late November, the landscape had a particular kind of austere beauty. Bare trees against gray ridgelines. The streets of the downtown district, lined with galleries and small restaurants and bookshops that looked like they had been there forever. Jenna's house was a small craftsman bungalow in a neighborhood called West Asheville. She had a front porch with 2 rocking chairs and a wind chime and a dog named Biscuit who barked once and then immediately needed to be pet. "You look exhausted," Jenna said at the door. "I'm okay," I told her. She looked at me. "You're allowed to not be okay." I stood on her porch and let that land for a moment. Then I carried my bags inside. I spent the first week sleeping, not out of depression exactly. More like my body had been running on tension for so long that the moment the tension released, it simply shut down for maintenance. I slept 9, 10 hours a night. I woke up and made coffee and sat with Biscuit on the porch and watched the mountain light move across the yard and didn't think about very much at all. The second week, I opened my portfolio. I hadn't looked at it with real eyes in over a year. I had been doing work. Good work, technically, but on autopilot. I had stopped taking creative risks. I had stopped pitching ideas that scared me. Derek's voice had gotten into my head and rearranged things, and I hadn't even noticed it happening. I looked at my early work and felt something unlock in my chest. There was a women's collective in Asheville called Thread and Ground. They worked with independent designers, artisan textile makers, local photographers. They had a small creative director position open. I had found it listed online while still in Chicago, tucked between bigger postings I wasn't ready for. It wasn't glamorous. It paid a fraction of what a Chicago position would have. I applied anyway. The interview was with a woman named Simone, who ran Thread and Ground out of a converted warehouse space on the east side of town. She had natural hair and paint on her forearm, and she looked at my portfolio the same way Daniel had looked at Claire's sketches, slowly, with full attention. "Your eye for texture is strong," she said, "and you understand how to build a visual narrative, not just an aesthetic. That's rarer than you'd think." "Thank you," I said. "Tell me about a project that felt like yours. Not a client's, yours." I thought for a second. Then I told her about a lookbook I had put together 3 years ago for a small, sustainable brand that never got off the ground. I had done it on a volunteer basis. I had shot it in a forest preserve outside Chicago on a Tuesday morning with 2 models, a borrowed camera, and a very specific vision of dappled light and raw linen. It was the last time I had made something that felt completely mine. Simone looked at me. "Why did you stop doing work like that?" I thought about the true answer. I let someone convince me it wasn't serious enough. She closed the portfolio. "You can start Monday." The work at Thread and Ground was the most alive I had felt creatively in years. Simone ran the space like a collaboration, not a hierarchy. When I suggested building an editorial series around Appalachian craft traditions, she didn't just approve it. She said, "Yes, and what do you need?" When I proposed partnering with a local photographer whose work I had been following on social media, she said, "Reach out today." I had forgotten what it felt like to have ideas and have someone meet them with more ideas instead of a slow, steady list of reasons. Why not? I worked on the cottage. Jenna's spare room had become my room, and I had started quietly personalizing it. A few prints on the wall, my lamp from Nashville on the nightstand, a small terrarium of succulents on the windowsill. It felt less like a borrowed space and more like mine. I went to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings. I found a yoga class I didn't hate. I started cooking again with actual interest, not meal prepping for a household schedule, but cooking something because I wanted to eat it. A shashuka on a rainy Thursday. A batch of lemon shortbread on a Sunday afternoon just because the apartment smelled good with it baking. 3 months in, Derek called from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Something made me pick up. Mara. His voice was careful, like he was watching himself from a distance. "Derek. How are you?" "Fine. What do you want?" He exhaled. I've been thinking. Cassandra and it's not what you think it was. I made a mistake. I want to talk about whether we can." "No," I said, not unkindly. "Just, clearly, I'm not asking you to forgive me tomorrow. I'm asking you to, Derek. The papers are filed. I have a lawyer. We're doing this correctly, and then we're done." I paused. "I really do hope you figure out what you need, but I'm not going to be the place you figure it out." I hung up. I sat with my coffee and looked out at Jenna's backyard, where Biscuit was losing a battle with a pine cone. I felt nothing, except a small, clean kind of relief. The papers were finalized in March. Cassandra, I heard through a mutual acquaintance, had already stopped returning Derek's calls by February. She had apparently told a coworker that she hadn't realized how much of his personality was about having someone to perform for, and once she was the main audience, the show had gotten old fast. I didn't feel satisfied by that. I mostly felt like it made sense. The turn came 6 months after I arrived in Asheville, and it came from the last direction I expected. Thread and Ground had been invited to show a small editorial feature at a regional design summit in Charlotte. Simone asked me to put it together. I spent 3 weeks building something I was genuinely proud of, a series called Rooted, showcasing the intersection of Appalachian craft and contemporary fashion. We shot it over 2 weekends in the mountains. The light was extraordinary. The models were local women of different ages and backgrounds. I styled everything with pieces from 5 independent makers in our network. At the summit, Rooted was displayed alongside features from organizations across the Southeast. The room was full of buyers, editors, and creative directors from firms I had been following since I was a junior assistant in Chicago. I was standing by the display explaining the project to a small cluster of people when a woman I didn't recognize stopped and studied the photographs for a long time. She had the particular stillness of someone who looks at a lot of creative work and has learned not to react quickly. She turned to me. "Did you direct this?" "Yes," I said. "I'm Claire Novak," she said. "I'm the editorial director at Meridian Style. We're relaunching our print issue in the fall, and we're looking for a visual director." I blinked. Meridian Style was a national publication, not the largest, but one of the most respected for independent and emerging designers. I had read it in my mother's living room in Ohio when I was 15 years old. "I'd like to set up a conversation," she said, and handed me her card. I looked at the card in my hand for a long moment after she walked away. My phone buzzed an hour later. It was Jenna. "How's Charlotte?" I typed back. "Something just happened. I think my life is about to change again." I found out about the rest of it later, from our mutual acquaintance Marcus, who still worked adjacent to Derek's world and had the particular talent of being present at awkward moments. What happened was this. Derek had not handled the divorce quietly. He had told his version of the story to anyone who would listen. That I had left suddenly, that I had been unstable, that our marriage had simply run its course, and he had moved on graciously. He had managed the narrative the way he managed everything, with precision and a certain amount of performance. What he hadn't managed was his behavior at a firm event in April. He had shown up with Cassandra, or rather a woman he had started seeing after Cassandra ended things, and had spent most of the event drinking scotch and holding court at a table of junior analysts who were too intimidated to disengage. At some point in the evening, Marcus had been standing in a small group that included 2 of Derek's senior partners when Derek approached. He was several drinks in. He was talking loudly about how the company's new direction was wrong, how his ideas were being ignored, how he had carried too many people for too long without recognition. One of the partners, a woman named Lillian, who Marcus described as someone with exactly no patience for this kind of behavior, turned to Derek and said very calmly, "Derek, is it your ex-wife the one who just got the Meridian Style appointment? I saw the announcement this morning." The table went quiet. "What?" Derek said. "Mara Calloway, visual director at Meridian Style." "The announcement went out today. It was on their site. I recognized the name." Lillian tilted her head slightly. "She came from your household, didn't she?" Derek's face, according to Marcus, did something complicated. He looked at Lillian. He looked at the people around him. He looked at the table. Then he laughed, too quickly. "Good for her," he said. Nobody laughed with him. What came after was a quieter unraveling, but an unraveling nonetheless. The narrative Derek had been maintaining, that I was the unstable one, the one without ambition, the one he had outgrown, cracked in that room. The people around him were the kind of people who tracked professional movements. They had seen the Meridian announcement. They started doing the math. One of the junior analysts, Marcus told me, had said to him afterward, "I looked her up. Her portfolio is incredible. Why would he leave someone like that?" The answer, of course, was the same as it always is. He hadn't thought I would go anywhere without him. Marcus called me on a Sunday morning while I was at the farmer's market. I had a bunch of sunflowers in one hand and my phone in the other, and I listened to the whole story standing next to a honey vendor who was very politely pretending not to hear. When Marcus finished, I thanked him. "Does it feel good?" he asked. "The whole thing." I thought about it genuinely. I thought about Derek's face in that moment, the complicated thing it did. I thought about Lillian saying my name at that table. Not really, I said, which was the honest answer. It just feels like the truth finally caught up. I put my phone in my pocket and bought the sunflowers and a jar of wildflower honey and walked back through the market in the Saturday morning light. Derek called twice over the following month. I let both calls go to voicemail. The first message was formal, something about logistics, a shared account that needed to be closed. The second message was different. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. Mara, I don't really have a reason for calling. I've been thinking about what I said. About your work. About calling it a hobby. I want you to know that I knew, even when I said it, that it wasn't true. I think I said it because I needed you to be smaller than you were. I think I needed that for a long time. Anyway, congratulations on the position. You were always gonna get there. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. Not out of bitterness. There was no bitterness left, which still surprised me sometimes. The way you can be surprised by the absence of pain after a long illness. I deleted it because it was the last thing I needed to hear from him, and now I had heard it, and I was done. I started at Meridian Style in September. Jenna threw me a dinner party the night I signed the contract. Nothing fancy, just her back patio and 5 or 6 people I had come to know in Asheville, paper plates and good wine and biscuit weaving between everyone's legs, looking for dropped food. Simone was there. She raised her glass and said, "To the ones who got told they were too much, and then went and became exactly as much as they always were." We drank to that. I still live in Asheville. I found my own apartment in March, the top floor of Old Victorian, a few blocks from Jenna Street, with windows that face east and hardwood floors the color of burnt honey, and a clawfoot tub I take full advantage of on Friday nights. I have a reading chair by the window and a small herb garden on the fire escape, and a collection of ceramic mugs that has grown to an unreasonable size and that I refuse to apologize for. My work is mine again. My time is mine. My mornings are mine. I wake up when I want to, I drink my coffee slowly, I read before I look at my phone. A few months ago, I was going through some old boxes I still hadn't fully unpacked, and I found a notebook from the early years in Chicago. Before Derek, before the Gold Coast condo, before I learned to make myself smaller. The notebook was full of sketches and ideas and color swatches and lists of projects I wanted to do someday. I sat on my kitchen floor and read through the whole thing. None of the ideas were bad. Several of them were genuinely good. I had just stopped listening to the person who had them. I put the notebook on my desk. I keep it there now. Not as a reminder of time lost. I don't think about it that way. I keep it there as proof. Proof that I knew who I was before someone told me I wasn't, and that knowing was enough to find my way back. Derek did not win by losing me. He just lost me, and I have never been more certain of the difference. If this story stayed with you, please like and share it. And leave a comment. Are you holding on to something you should have let go of a long time ago? Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop being the reason someone else feels big.